So it's been a lovely kind of exploration, and it only has two parts to it: Black excellence, which is, choose how
Right.
you want to define it, and it's San Diego. And so I've talked to rappers and CEOs and activists and educators, and it's been lovely. And and now I'm here with you. So I think, so the way it usually goes is, you know, a little intro on who you are, how you represent yourself in the world, and what you're up to,
Right.
and then just a chat about how you came to be doing that and what you've taken. What are your guiding lights and current challenges, and with the aim of mining the gems from your life for folks to be inspired by and aspire toward. So
Okay.
I'm
So
setting.
which me do you want to have show up
Oh,
there?
I want the full, the all. There's no.
Oh, you.
You,
Okay.
yeah, the whole, like, I don't endeavor to call that. So I'm this kind of biotech professional in San Diego, but I show up here very much as a whole person. So I've started churches. I've you know um, been in companies and done men's work, and
Mhm.
fascinated by that intersection of race and faith and all that. So just the full you.
Okay. It'll take me a second to drop into him because
Mm,
this is like to
mm,
move
mm,
into that
mm,
quality of conversation is a completely different invitation.
mm,
Because you know, I read what you were asking, and
mm.
so I could do that on one level.
Sure.
But what you're actually asking is something profoundly different.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, okay, then I can meet you there.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, I'm arriving. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. My goodness. So, coming from that place, um, if I were to ask you what it is you're up to in this place at this time, what would you say?
I'm at this place and space of trying to find the space between.
Mm-hmm.
It's the language that I've been using literally in the last 3 days. Because what I'm recognizing is that the quality of polarity is such that it doesn't allow any more nuance in any kind of conversation, any kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the self-sealing nature of
Mm-hmm.
these conversations is such that anyone that tries to be a bridge or find a way to navigate those spaces is suspect.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think I have been about most of my life is trying to figure out what are the available narratives that allow us to get to something that resembles a consensual reality. And and I am finding it increasingly difficult to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you, I'm looking for people that can even have that beginning of a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking around my networks, not just like any one particular, around my networks, and trying to find people who have the capacity to hold complexity in their consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And what I am finding, unfortunately, is so much investment either in an identity or an ideology or a particularity that there is far less room to explore different currents of understanding the nature of our being right now. So that's the first level.
Mm-hmm.
The second level of what I'm at and about is literally providing space for people to do this as best they can, trying to have empathy for the different developmental levels at which people find themselves, and then continuing my own journey into what may be, you know, capacity on one hand, but also maybe shadow. on the other hand, and sort of recognizing that at any moment something can be activated and triggered in me that is not right. And when I'm using right, I'm using it more in the Buddhist sense of right, as opposed to the moral, like Western.
Oh, understood, my friend.
Okay. And so trying to just be attentive to that as a sort of a constant space. And as you know, my husband's a Jesuit, and so the whole notion of detachment, uh, and from a sort of a Jesuit sort of Catholic mystical perspective, and the whole notion of attachment, from a sort of a Buddhist or an Eastern perspective, is what I'm trying to work with. Is that how to be as concerned as I am about so many things that are going on, and unfortunately, at times finding myself being like this antenna or server for all of that stuff, but then locating myself, and then I get lost, and then if I get lost because I'm too much of a vessel for the information, then I then finding my own bounded space in this embodied form gets to be challenging. So that's the real deal of what I'm about right now. I don't usually say it out loud, but that's what I've been traversing.
Oh my goodness, I am deeply honored with that share. Um, I feel like it's funny, like I'm having a moment of hearing, you know, consciousness speak back to me. That's very interesting. So, as a person who literally lives in between space, and I've had mantras in my own life of kind of embrace gray space, and how do we coax folks out into that unknown? And it's funny, polarity is something through like David Data's work, and he's kind of in that integral world too. And I know he kind of comes at it in his own particular way, but I've found some fruit in recognizing the creative tension of polarity and the ability to kind of alternate, finding those resonances in my own person in different modes, and being flexible enough with them to find the creative part that comes from the in between. And then this idea, Anthony DeMello wrote a book that when I read it about attachment, that I am, or I think more specific about detachment, that I sent to my family because it was such a lightning rod in my life at one time. And so, yes, I think I'm just trying to mirror and resonate with what you've just said. And I'm so curious then what the tools look like in your current journey to kind of affect some of that embodiment. So one other thing I'll say around shadow work and being conscious of your unconscious, and how do you partner with other people. There's a friend of mine, kind of a psychoanalytic friend of mine, that likes to say, you can't see your own face really. Even in the mirror, it's not the face that's actually being shown. You need other people to tell you about your face. And I love that. And how to create environments where there are no eggshells, let's say, and people feel, at least, well, maybe we can include eggshells, and I say that, I know that's laden, but just how do we endeavor together to form these environments with complexity, where people have the selfhood and the grounding to do the work. So where have you, in this time, the strangest of times, been finding support, like encouragement?
That's fine. I understand what you're saying. The real answer is I have no place.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
real answer.
Yeah.
I have approximations of the space.
Yeah.
So, for example, Rise San Diego is an approximation of the
Yeah.
space. My work in the group relations world at its highest level is
Mm-hmm.
an approximation of the space. And then I have select friends with whom I can do the kind of thinking that I revealed to you. One in particular, Fabiola Bagula, who's at the San Diego County
Mm-hmm.
Office of Education. She and I are writing a piece on emancipatory leadership right now. And where I can venture into these spaces of thought unfettered.
Yes.
And so it requires that. And so in terms of practice, and this is Rise at its ideal as opposed to its functioning.
Mm-hmm.
At its ideal, it provides a healing of trauma so that one recognizes one's trauma, so that you're not projecting it back into the communities that you're allegedly serving.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, by activating the trauma, then you become an organization that's a repository of it. It's a challenge of that. And group relations work similarly. You're looking at the unconscious processes and the more primal elements that are part of the human condition. But then, unfortunately, projective processes mean that people don't want to hold that stuff. And so, therefore, people end up embodying that work in a way that creates casualties, emotional casualties. And people literally carry around other people's projections for years and years after those experiences, though for me, it has been incredibly liberating. And then the work that Fabiola and I are currently doing, and I hope we're able to finish it sometime soon, at least the first essay on it, is that the idea of not only the enslavement that is at the physical level, but is also at the psychic level, and what it really takes for people to recognize how they're complicit in their own enslavement, while at the same time wanting to dismantle systems of oppression, both concurrently, so that my investment in my own enslavement is because then it at least gives me a reality against which I have to find some foil. And then in the absence of that, then who am I? And so how this subtly perpetuates some of the dynamics that we still find ourselves in. And so to be able to just go there without it being seen as, supporting of hegemonic structures and, victim blaming and gaslighting and all this kind of language that is now created that precludes the exploration of the edges of this is what actually gives me my strongest sense of grounding. Because I want to find out where the edges of this are, because in discovering it, then we have more potential for a greater number of us to be present to it, so that we each have more range within ourselves. So to the degree that I can find those places and spaces, or if they don't exist, create them with other people who are sufficiently like-minded, then I'm good. But the problem is
Few and far between. Few and far between.
limited. It's limited.
Yeah. Yes. Whew. So the fruit for me. Oh my word. I knew I was reading your biography to my wife, MFT from Azusa Pacific. So that's why, or no, from Fuller. I'm sorry, from Fuller. So that was my joke about the seminarian. But and just reading your journey at the depth that it was, that we were just like, this person exists. Like, I'm gonna talk to Yoda today. I can't even believe it. So I just thank you, personally and then collectively, for your attempt to hold this like valence, to embody this thing. It's I can feel it as you sit here with me in San Diego somewhere. So that comes up for me strongly. But as you talk about, creating capacities for evolution, for transformation, I resonate a lot with spaces, in kind of Christian evangelical spaces. It's kind of, I don't want to say in vogue because it cheapens it a little bit, but this process of deconstruction for people who have lived in much more rigorous or restrictive concepts of Christianity as they escape some of that. um, it's kind of a triage room at the hospital of a lot of bleeding, and without a lot of formation then. And so in my own experience, I've come to these places where you say, well, then what does healing look like? And that thing you mentioned of, okay, if I start to heal myself and change my own identity in relationship to the thing that has been challenging, how do I get enough distance between it? It often sucks me back in. I just become defined by my objection instead of finding new space from which to build a new thing and have a much more objective, whole, transformative place to lead from and coach from.
Wonderfully well.
And so I've struggled with this. I'm on the same search and same journey, I guess I say to you. The things that have been most helpful to me personally have been kind of men's work and rite of passage work, Mankind Project kind of stuff. And I know Richard Rohr kind of does similar stuff in Illumin and things in the more kind of Christian-y type space. But that along with, kind of classic recovery spaces, 12-step type spaces that really call folks into radical personal accountabilities. But I wonder for you, you mentioned kind of Eastern philosophies and then the kind of Catholic ones. Have you, and I'm looking behind you there at these wonderful, and me too, right? I've got my kind of mask on the wall here, this kind of Afrocentric yearning, leaning, appreciation. Have you discovered any kind of African-centered, and I'm curious, just for you yourself, actually, how this has all kind of intertwined. How have you, as a person of African descent, walked into this space that you're feeling called into? It's one. And have you found African-centered methodology or resource to aid your journey into this space?
I sometimes let a few people know now more since this is being recorded.
Well, you always have the option to. I can, it's up to
If I
you.
were to allow myself to have a tattoo, it would be an ayugai, which is it's the symbol. Do I have? Yeah, I have it. Where is close enough? Let me go get it for you.
Okay.
Where did I move it?
Oh,
Here it is.
yeah. Mm. That's what Jay Lee has on his arm. Do you know that where you just did this?
Mm-hmm.
It is on Jay Lee's arm. That.
Okay, and that's what I would do. If I were to do a tattoo, that's what I would do.
Oh my word.
Okay, and so it's literally close enough all the time. And I used to have one on the wall, but I'm 90% certain I gave it to a Rise Fellow who was feeling it.
Yes.
And I gave it to another of my doctoral students who was feeling my other one. So
Well, talk to me about it. I'm unfamiliar with the symbol.
Okay, what it means is God's omnipotence.
Spell it for me if you don't mind.
AYE, and I think it's GYE, but it's I will find it.
Yes. God's omnipotence.
Right. And so, and then the first time I did basically an all-Black staff group relations piece of work with a group of nurses. We designed the experience around the symbol so that people literally sat in God's omnipotence while they were experiencing it, which just gave me an idea for something that I might want to transform about how I do Rise. But anyway, so from that once I discovered, I don't know when or how I discovered, it has been like an oblique
Hmm.
internal holding
Hmm.
ever since then. But see, Africa messed me up because when I went to South Africa, I land in Cape Town. I'm waiting for my people to greet me, and then I get on one of these little buses, and this dude speaks to me in Afrikaans, which
Yes,
basically means that I'm colored. I'm not. You're not really black.
yes, yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
but yet the things that you see around me were a part of that journey, so that it was something that I needed to carry with me to
Mm-hmm.
remind me
Mm-hmm.
constantly that a good portion of my blood is of that ilk.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a part of the cosmology of the total, but there is so much Western inculcation and whiteness, that has been taken in, that it sometimes doesn't always express itself as dominance in my being.
Mm-hmm.
But oh gosh, I'm not liking you right now because I'm activating the real deal. So there's a process known as psychosynthesis, and one of the exercises in psychosynthesis is this regression work, where you allow aspects of yourself to ascend, and I'll explain that to you in a second.
Yeah.
But first, you have to find out your subpersonalities that are actually residing in you, and they're usually archetypal expressions of yourself in some form or another. And to speak to them and know them. So I did this work. And then the next exercise is once you identify these sort of subpersonalities, not like Sybil stuff, but really these subpersonalities, these other personae in you that are speaking through you all the time
Is
in
this
various
Wild
places and
Mind?
spaces.
Is this Wild Mind? Is that the?
I'm sorry.
Is this Wild Mind work?
No. My work is through Roberto Assagioli, who wrote this book
Oh,
called Psychosynthesis. But there are other pathways of doing this work.
Plotkin is who I was thinking about. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Yes.
That's all right. I know you're doing associations. This is happening. I get it.
Just like.
And so anyway, so what I did is so there's this one of the characters is I am you. Okay, but I am you, but his name is I am you. Okay, his name. And he is he is me, but he is the more African rooted representation, the much darker hue and the strong and the much more hued visage and physiognomy. Okay. And then what I needed to do was then I have another part of this gluton yo, which is closer to my actual size right now. And so, but ascending gluton yo was that at each level, then you would just sort of strip away whatever that was and strip away until I got to this point where this incredible, strong, vital, vigorous, truly like African self was ascending, and reaching out to the light. I mean, it was stunning to feel that part of myself in me. And so this is a constant reminder of that.
Oh my goodness. I gotta pace myself with you. It's just a joy. I've just, So then, in light of that statement, so where I was going to go, as you said, in this psychosynthesis, the work of kind of giving space for, and then the ascension of these components of yourself. Before you began that dialogue, I thought, what was childhood like? What was it like growing up as Zach Green in the spaces you were at, and how did race read on that, and how did you turn this have you always been moving at this depth? Have you always been this receptive to your inner world and wanting to kind of guide others through it? I'm super curious about that.
He didn't show up until I was about 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
He began to arrive when I was 9, but he didn't show up until I was 12, the guy that's speaking to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
I was born on the cusp of civil rights movement. So in Alabama, Rosa Parks is, leading that sort of charge. And I'm in deeply segregated Columbus, Georgia. So, and my father's family was so impoverished. They lived next to a highway on a dirt road across from an abandoned gas station and didn't have heat. So they had a potbelly stove, and we had one of those big tin wash tubs to take your bath on Saturday night. That's the level of poverty that my father's family knew. But in contrast, my mother's family had a house with a bed, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom and a kitchen, and room in the backyard to grow some corn and some sugar cane, and so these, and he had a job and he lived with my grandmother, and so, and he would come home and drink his, I think it was Schlitz.
Malt liquor, baby.
No, it was just straight up Schlitz. He didn't drink the malt liquor. He had like 1 can.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. 1 can, and he would sit in his chair after working at Tom's Toasted Peanuts. But he had a full-time job, and and in that respect, we have this sort of stability. And so I grew up in that. But then, because of my father's professional role, then that meant that we moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And we would go back and forth between the North and the South. And so I literally began to have this back and forth experience. And then also because I had teen parents, my grandparents, who I just described to you, who lived in the house, were in essence raising me all of that time, because my father was at college, but he wasn't allowed to come home. 1, because he didn't have any money, and 2, because my grandfather said, "Don't you come near my daughter again until you can take care of her." Okay.
Yes.
And so once he was able to take care of us, then we moved to Cleveland, but still went back and forth because he was a professional football player in the early 60s. That was before money came into the profession, and Black folks in particular, they were ambivalent about us. It's the same as in baseball. And so he played early on, and since you never know, he was learning how to be a teacher and all that kind of stuff, just in case his football career ended abruptly. But he was able to play for 7 seasons, and long enough to have enough income to then allow us to stay in the neighborhood where we were, which is Shaker Heights, Ohio. And so when I was 9 years old, when in September, and entered, and there's Kathy Newman and Larry Lipscomb and 21 other white people. Larry was soon put back into 3rd grade. And then the teacher said, "Who will be here on Rosh Hashanah?" I didn't put, and everybody suddenly stood up, and I thought, "Oh, I missed something." And then 2 days later, Kathy Newman and I and David Presagius were the only 3 people in school. And then there was a whole other culture and way of being and different form of oppression and stories around oppression, but achievement. And so this alternative narrative about how one encounters and works with oppression, but yet you don't forget that story as who are these Jewish people? And so that, and so in the absence of Black folks, because the next wave of Black folks was literally 2 years later, literally 2 years. So there was this period of trying to find and locate friendships, which was deeply formative. And then what happened is that was when this guy who was trying to bridge spaces began to show up. So I remember in junior high school, which was this melange of these super wealthy, because Shaker Heights was at the time one of the 10 wealthiest suburbs in the country. I didn't know that. Okay. And it had one of the best public school systems in the country. I mean, literally was ranked in the top 10.
Wow.
And 90% of everybody went to college. It wasn't if you're going to go, where are you going? So that was sort of built into the expectation. So in what is called middle school now, for junior high school, I was the kid that when a new kid came in, I would be their friend for 2 weeks until they found their own friends. And I still had my friends, but I was I would be their first friend. Yeah, and then I got into school politics, became vice president of the 9th grade, and then in high school, then I was the school president and all that kind of stuff. But our school was, 35% black, 60% white, and then 5% a melange of other things, which literally meant that I was bridging between those spaces all the time. And our cafeteria was L-shaped. And so the black folks sat on this and the white folks sat on that side. And my best friend was Randy, but he was white. And so we would sit in the middle. But since I was school president, I was high school, the president of the class, that was too political. And so I would sometimes go into the black section, go into the white section. But then eventually I was saved because the school then gave me my own office because I was the president of this class. And then, so I had a desk in the little space there. And so that's where I spent my entire high school, rather than choose one side or the other.
Wow.
Then my senior year, why am I telling you all this? My senior year,
I love it.
I was running for re-election, and then Kathy Newman, who you may remember from this story, who was my girl. We were supposed to be we were like these smart black people, so we were supposed to end up together. But this gay thing was arriving. But there was no such thing as gay then. So anyway, and then I knew that gay and black was not going to work, so that was not an option. So anyway, what it was is that there were these 2 black guys running for vice president, and so and then this other guy was running against me. Carol Malone was running against me, and so I knew that I had the white vote, and all I needed to do was split the black vote. And
you knew this. No, you did not. The strategy. This is 12th grade?
Oh, yeah. If you watch the show Election, that's on Netflix right now, or whatever, or Politician, I was not too far from that dude. I really was not. And so Kathy was so upset with me because I wouldn't be really her boyfriend, that she went to the black section of the cafeteria, said that all I needed to do was split the black vote, which galvanized the black vote behind Carol, and I only won by 3 votes.
Oh no! Oh no!
So anyway, so this notion of location and bridging, then early in the developmental phase of it, really have the sort of political calculus to it. So I'm just sort of owning that kind of part of it.
Yeah.
But then it began to be one where I understood that the lived experiences of people was dramatically different. So I became a high school teacher in my own high school.
Wow.
And because I was the black teacher, I was assigned to the lower level classes. And my first class as a high school teacher was with 19 boys and 2 girls. The 2 girls saw the first day dropped out of that class. I had 19 boys, of which 17 were black male, who had somehow gotten to 9th grade, gotten to 12th grade and could barely write a paragraph, and definitely no more than 2 could write a whole essay. And so encountering that as a lived experience, I said, how is it that I navigated the same system and end up being president of the class, going to college, finishing college, was a law school wannabe, but I always wanted to be a teacher. How did that happen that I had that experience? And there were other Black kids that didn't. So what I did at that time is I started a group, all 6 of them, there were 7 of them altogether, and 5 out of the 7, we developed a group so that they could be Black and also navigate these advanced placement classes. I did another group that was called Group. That's literally what it was called. It was in Black and White and Jewish, and we would sit together as a peer counseling group on Fridays and try to figure out like the nature of the planet. And then I decided that I had to do something with my life other than hang out in a high school. So then I went to graduate school. Before we did that, they developed a thing called the Student Group on Race Relations 35 years ago, which still exists to this day. And CNN just did a thing on them, which was really about having the conversations about race that were leading to the gaps in achievement because the Black kids and the white kids split in 7th grade. So we intervened at 6th grade to try to make that a conscious choice that people would have, young people would have, about where, not just where you sit in the cafeteria, but what you were doing with your academic trajectory. And that this was not set in stone by the color of your skin. And so, like I said, they've been working on it. So the kind of conversations that the planet is having right now, we were having those 35 years ago. And so I've been ever since then bridging that. Okay, so one more story.
Yeah.
So then, so the highest level of this was then when I was on the dialogue development team for the President's Commission on Race during the Clinton administration. Okay. So there are organizations that will not be named at that table, and I represented what was then called the National Multicultural Institute. I'm up in this meeting and I said, unless we figure out our competition with each other's as organizations and the different, I didn't use the language of narrative, but I will use that language now, and the different narratives that we carry around how this is going to be done, we run the risk of creating a dynamic where we are not really doing a service to this dialogue. Well, 2 of the organizations decided that I lost my mind, that there was no competition between us, and that we were really just working for the good of the nation. If you study the history of that effort, the whole thing failed because 1, the dialogue processes did not attend to the fact that race was constructed differently in different parts of the country. So Native American people and Mexican people rightfully protested it because it was all about Black and white. And then what I was trying to raise for us to grapple with that with each other so that we could begin to deal with that as a larger construct failed. And so what that taught me was there was so much investment, like I said earlier, in our discourse that then is not possible to dismantle it because we have our chosen and preferred narratives around this stuff, and it just locks us in. So I've been trying to do all of that my entire life ever since I was little.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my, yes, I used to describe that in corporate settings, right? All the kind of diversity and equity and inclusion work that happened. I was one of, those folks trotted out to help bridge the gaps because for reasons I've already described, and I kind of enjoy having the conversation and recognize there's no light switch really, right? We're all just going to agree to try to get, hydrated in our New Balance on and go do this marathon and see what part of it we want to join in on. But I used to talk about, is it possible to engineer empathy? And our good friend Brene talks so much about that. But I have found that an intimate relationship is a beautiful crucible for helping. And I almost feel like it should be like a performance metric, and I'm sure that would be deemed, exclusionary and not very inclusive just on its own. But for me personally, it's been so fruitful. So you alluded to it. I'm curious about what you think about that, and then
But the
also
moment
how
we're
you.
in, you mean
Pardon me?
this moment that we're in, or the capacity to create, construct
Well,
empathy?
well, the capacity to construct empathy, how intimate relationship might read on that, and then I'm super curious about you coming into your identity as a gay black man in the U.S. of A. And
I don't believe in any of those constructions.
so then, help me, talk to me. Now, broker that conversation.
I do believe it's possible to grow in empathy. That I grow in empathy, construct empathy. I'm not sure, but
Mm-hmm.
grow in empathy. I think that there are enough experiences that people can have, and that there's a vicarious awareness that comes from that. That I do believe then builds like, ooh, what is that? They're responding that way. I think I'm supposed to feel something. And then I think after a while, when there's enough of those experiences around you, then you begin to wonder what it is that you're blocking, holding, not able to allow yourself to fully embrace. And then what that's doing in terms of, even from a sort of an egoistic perspective, what that's doing to block an aspect of your own human experience. And I don't care if I really don't. All I care about is that the ability to recognize the emotive nature of life and activate one's own limbic system is kind of important. So I believe that can be something that happens. Okay, so that's the first part.
Mm-hmm.
The second part is I do believe it is in relationship and in the space of relationship that allows that. Is the exchange of one to another then allows for the possibility of having a mirror held up to you constantly. Even if it's a distortion, at least it's a different view of you. Now, obviously, if those distortions are inherent and continuous and oppressive, then it distorts. And so a lot of what is going on in the world around inequities is that these false mirrors are held up to people and they believe that there's an actual reflection. You go all the way back to Plato's cave, then people don't even know that there's anything other than the dance of the shadows on the wall. So that really is the level of enslavement at a sort of an emotional cognitive level that people have. Okay. Okay. And the absence of consciousness around those things then creates the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so this delimited discourse that we call DEI, which used to be called multicultural work, which used to be called race relations, it's just an iterative expression of the same dynamic because we're not actually learning much of anything around this stuff. Because the social reinforcement to create something that stabilizes in a recognizable form is dominant. It isn't like one group is dominant. It's the dominance of the collective construction. That's the most annoying and mind-numbing thing about it. So I'm doing this racial equity series, which I believe in because it creates more of a range for conversation for people. But the actual thing that I believe is that we have an investment in our collective construction. And that unless we dismantle this together, we're just going to go back to our respective corners in due time until a critical mass of us gets to the point of a shift in the consciousness. And that's the part that I alternate between being absolutely hopeless about and then having hope amid it anyway. Okay, now this construction of, you just called me.
I called your names. I called your names. I'm so sorry.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe in either one. I believe race is a construct. I believe sexual orientation as a construct. I
Yes.
think that there are lived experiences within those constructs to which I subscribe because they have political currency and they're
Yes.
necessary. So I used to work for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force.
Yes.
I was literally the consultant when the B and the T were added to the agenda. And the decision was made to begin to go hang out at college campuses because getting these older folks to change their mind wasn't going to work. So let's begin to have LGBT centers, you know? And they added the B folks, but the L's and the G's thought that the B's were just confused. And I had a person there who was from, I won't say what organization he's a part of, said, why should we let these surgical freaks into our community?
Yeah,
Okay,
believe it. Believe it.
okay, and so this was the conversation that I was facilitating years ago, 20 years ago. I don't know when it was, but whenever I was facilitating that conversation. But it was a political decision at the meeting, you know, where, sexual orientation is not a choice, we're born into it, all that stuff. No, at the meeting, it is a highly immutable course, but it really is something, but politically, okay? So the people in the meeting made a political decision about broadening, and then also to make the decision that it was a part of a broader civil rights movement, of which, what the hell? So it's like when Black, what civil rights, and so, but that was a conscious decision in a meeting that I facilitated. All right. Now, I don't believe in any of it. Okay?
Yes.
Okay? I believe we love who we love. And that in that loving, then you find your way to that root of intimacy and to sort of delimit ourselves to something that we call an orientation. While I do believe there's sort of like, genetic propensities and dispositions that lead to a certain place on the spectrum, the way that it is used is a political act. That's what I'm concerned about. So, yes, I'm a gay Black man in terms of like the politics of life as it is constructed in the United States. And my husband and I were among the first people to have parent one, parent two on our birth certificates of our children that we adopted. Yes. Okay. And in the Netherlands, they made this very narrow ruling because we were married and had kids. Then they recognized gay marriage, but they didn't recognize gay adoption. But since they had this thing with the United States, then they had to recognize our adoption. But they didn't want that to be precedent. And so they made this very narrow decision around our particular case. We had to go to basically just below the Supreme Court in the Netherlands to get that ruling. Okay, so yes. I've been a part of all this sort of political stuff, and yes, I see that, and yes, I know that people live in the currency of this every day. I totally get that, and a lot of my work is helping people traverse those spaces, and I believe it's not the consciousness that's going to need. It's not the consciousness that's needed to transform this. No. Okay, I have to drink water.
Do it, dear brother, do it. I've wrestled with this myself. I've wrestled so much, around because, where this starts to angle for those of us who consider ourselves like, maybe is the smallest, we'll put the boxes like children of God or something, or, consciousness, love, period, And then we find, though, in our experience, this cacophony of light and variety and wonder-filled physicality. And then one can't help but admit that somehow the finiteness, the particularity, confesses something about the universal. But so how do we paradoxically embody what may at times be just a political construct that doesn't serve a ton of, that is more kind of oppressive and divisive than it is unifying? and flip the script, if you will, and turn it into an instrument in the orchestra or a paint color on the tapestry and celebrate and affirm and step into it. So for a long while, all this kind of, let's take gender. I wrestled too. They're like, well, is it important? And a lot of kids these days are just like, just put an A in front of whatever it is. I don't want to identify any of it. You can't tie me down. I don't want to be. I don't want to define.
Not that, and then, you can't say I'm non-binary and I'm not
I'm not. Yeah,
straight.
yeah,
I know. The young people just threw it
yeah.
out.
They're like, I'm out. I'm not getting any of your boxes. And so, me at 45, there has been an interesting benefit, at least as I measure it now at this part of my journey, in embodying a particular
Mhm.
construct.
Yes.
In the same way that I'm you shows up for you,
Yeah.
not as the totality, but as a color, as a note
Yeah.
that's accessible, and
Agree. Agree.
like there's something there that I find in the same way that I'm right-handed, and that I have call it preference or orientation, whatever. I have my proclivities, and so to me, that whether that's nature or nurture, it is. And so being able to kind of sit in that, there's a term, kind of transcend and include, right? So how do I, as a person endeavoring to vibrate at a certain tone and and have an experience of all things that is at a certain level, enter into harmonious relationship with folks all along, whatever, if you want to take an integral approach or developmental approach or whatever it is, all along the spectrum of consciousness. That to me,
Yeah.
I got it like when in Rome, you know what I mean? Like I have to be multilingual and very, you know, wise as serpents and gentle as doves or whatever they say. Um, so, uh,
Well, what you said in terms of an integral understanding, I think,
mhm,
is the key part of it.
mhm.
I have an appreciation for the clarity of constructive identity. I really do.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, and
yeah.
I am trying not to become cynical and contemptuous. That's the problem. That's the danger for me right now. I am so cynical about it.
Yeah.
If it descends into contempt, then I'm going to lose the exact empathy that we talked about before.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
But
heard.
but Wilbur, Claire Graves, and Beck and
Mhm,
Cohen, and all those folks that did the integral work
mhm,
really invite us, at that second tier of consciousness to hold the whole.
mhm,
And then other writers did the same thing in terms of
mhm,
the human stuff,
mhm,
in terms of inter-individual and all of that
mhm,
kind of stuff, and Cook Reuter. So all these people really are inviting us to a space of human potential that is beyond
mhm,
our current lived experience.
mhm, mhm,
And as I sort of gravitate more in that space on a daily,
mhm,
I think the early developmental part of that, which
mhm,
is where I think I am right now,
mhm.
there's an impatience with then
Yeah,
what where you used to be.
yeah.
I have an impatience with a part of me that I described to you, my 17-year-old self,
Mhm,
and how politically it was about political calculus
mhm,
as opposed to what was the need of the senior class,
mhm,
for example.
mhm,
I can see that now,
mhm.
but that's 50 years intervening, almost 50 years
Yeah,
intervening
yeah.
to be able to see that. And
Mhm,
so this is the same thing here, is that uh, what good is this level of consciousness to which I'm arriving
mhm,
if I cannot figure out a way to bridge to others who
mhm,
have the same capacity, but
mhm,
it may not yet have been activated? You see, that's where I am right now. And so this has been given to me at every level that I've had thus far from an integral perspective, then what is this transcendent level? I don't like that label, but
Mhm.
let's use the label.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
is it at the transcendent level, an alchemical level, whatever
Mhm.
language you want
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
teal. I'm not quite teal, but let's say turquoise. Okay. Uh, what is it? What is it that
Mhm.
then I have a responsibility
Mhm.
to then begin to inculcate,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
create, to
Yeah.
help co-construct?
Yes.
This conversation is a representation of that.
Yes.
That I'm completely out, in
Mhm.
terms of how I don't talk like this.
Mhm.
But you invited me to
I love it
the
so much.
wholeness,
I love
you know.
it.
And so the wholeness of it is that I'm literally this week grappling with that. If I do rise, then I can't do rise the way that I have anymore.
Mhm.
But rise is needed as I created it,
Mhm.
the fellowship program.
Mhm.
So there
Mhm.
may be other people that need to do that part, and then there's something else that I'm going to use the divinely called to
Yeah.
do that's different,
Yeah. Mhm.
and that it's emerging, and I can't quite yet see
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
And so to begin to accept that, that's the portal to which, and to the degree that I hold on to what's there. I think my Zen calendar even said it today.
Mhm.
Is that I've succumbed to the attachment
Mhm.
to some sort of past form, and I am no longer that form.
Mhm. There's two things that come up for me as you say this. One,
That's what my
are
go
you
ahead.
okay? Are you okay on time?
No, I'm not, but let's continue. I'll figure out. I have to talk to some analysts in 45 minutes because I'm doing a thing on anti-racism for psychoanalysts.
Oh.
And they want to have these planning meetings, and so I have a planning meeting with them.
Oh.
And so I need to at least give them a rough outline of what
Yeah.
it is, because they've already decided to put some webinars
Yes.
off of the readings that I've sent them, let alone the actual event that's going to happen in January. But anyway,
Have you listened to even?
let's do another 15 minutes or so. That's about what I can tolerate.
Okay.
And also, my Zen calendar said today, if you realize that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so that's literally where I am.
Man, this is so rich. I feel like I could talk to you for a long time. The two little things, and I do want to be mindful of your time, and that come up. One, I was attempting to describe in my email to you, kind of my selfish
Well,
kind of underpinnings for all this chatter, all this dialogue. But really, like in my mind, to be able to locate in my proximal space here in San Diego like-minded folks of sufficient kind of capacity and uh, influence to, you know, talent intent is not the right word. Vanguard might not be the right word, but this thing that you're leading,
but that is what it is.
you know what I mean? But whatever, wherever, whew, I think you understand what I'm saying. I can't quite find the language. Whatever helps to usher in this transformation, this evolution, accelerated personal growth, empowerment, whatever it is, that helps people regain their, contact with their righteous minds is what I'm about. And
I feel it.
so I love hearing you kind of speak in that direction. I'm curious if have you come across okay, two things. Enneagram stuff comes up from you that was very much in vogue in kind of churchy spaces. What's your Enneagram thought?
I, Renee tells me what my Enneagram is all the time, and I don't know. But
Is it a one?
no, I'm not a one. He thinks I'm either a four or an eight.
Or an eight? Yes. I tell him I'm a seven with an eight wing.
Yeah,
So I'm smiling while I'm trying to burn it all down, basically.
yeah. I told him I was a two. He told me I was lying to myself So he says you're 4, okay, and you have a strong 8, and then and you borrow from 5 on a regular.
Yes, yes. See that? I could see that. I could see that. The last little comment I'll make is Ibram Kendi, speaking of anti-racism, did an audible. You know, he with Jason Reynolds, my buddy who I mentioned at the beginning, is friends with Jason Reynolds. Where Jason Reynolds does a lot of like young adult kind of black centered stuff, and they did this audible of Stamped, which is meant to be the kid version of Stamped from the beginning. So Ibram Kendi, before he did the anti-racism book, did this Stamped from the beginning history book, and it is gorgeous. I'm gonna have to like send you a link or something. It is like, if you're looking, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen all the things, but the production, the voicing, the
Mhm.
sound, this is what it looks like,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
is just gorgeous. Like, and it's content that people my age and your age in this country, I don't think have thought of, and so for them to be designing it for kids that are kind of middle school age, anyway, it's just it's beautiful. So I just deposit that as a resource. Um, I don't know that I would say anything else to you. It is a deep, um, whew, like emotional. It's just a joy for me to know you're here and there. This
Well,
has been
thank you.
lovely.